Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Reaction Show. My name is Andrew Velez, and I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Joel Dehls. We are here after Thursday Night Football. We are here after the Dolphins obviously lose to the Buffalo Bills in pretty bad fashion, 31-10. But, of course, the storyline's not about the outcome of the game, which, of course, we'll get to. But more importantly to me, Tua Tagovailoa unfortunately suffers another concussion late into this game as he's trying to make a play on fourth down. He dives headfirst into DeMar Hamlin, and he goes down to the ground, and obviously he's making some irregular hand motions, involuntary hand motions, and it's very reminiscent of what we saw in 2022 versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Before we get into all that, though, Mr. Dehls, how are you doing today, sir?
Damn, sad way to start the show. No, this was pretty bad. I can't even really talk about how I'm doing. Obviously, I'm in a different spot right now in Florida for the weekend, but still was able to catch this game, caught all of it, and I thought we were going to come up here and it was going to be a real conversation about Miami, where they stand in the AFC, where they stand in the AFC East. But now this conversation has completely changed, and you have all of the speculation, all of the Twitter doctors going crazy saying what Tua should or shouldn't do for the rest of his career, even for this season. But I think just get right into it, man. I think the people want to hear your reactions, your first impressions. I don't think impressions is the right word, but your just first thoughts when you see Tua go down and as the game ends, kind of where you think Miami goes from here. Now, I don't think we have to do like season long. Is he retiring? But just kind of week to week, is this something that you think is going to be an IR potential stint where Tua is going to be missing several weeks? Because it's one thing where normally quarterbacks have to miss 1 week for concussion, right? Or players in general. We saw all of last year. If you have a concussion, you're out for a minimum of 1 week. But Miami has like a whole nother spin on this that is the long-term health of Tua and just the overall kind of PR of this move. Like Tua could look 100% next week. He could get cleared by doctors, but I'm sure Miami is still going to have that pressure of saying, we can't go and start him right away. We have to be super, super careful about how we kind of treat this going forward because of the history. So just want to get your thoughts. Of course, I know it's your favorite quarterback, it's your favorite guy in the league, but kind of where you're at right now.
To be honest, I was dreading doing the show. I really don't want to be up here talking about this. It was really sad for me. This is my favorite player in the league. There's no hiding that. We all understand that. I understand that he's a lot of people's, favorite butt of the joke. He didn't have that great of a performance prior to the injury, and I was ready to come up here and 100% accept that and admit that. But seeing this game go out, seeing Tua go out the way that he did really was just a punch to the stomach. As a fan of the sport, as a fan of the game, if you're up here and you're poking fun at things like this, you have so many bigger problems in life, and that's something that you guys have to focus on. But seeing him go down immediately and understanding that we had seen something like this from him already, my immediate reaction, I jump up, I scream, not again. Please, God, don't let this happen to Tua again. It was already horrific the first time, and it was one of those that it was one of the worst injuries I've ever seen in my life. But then for it to happen again, where you see the involuntary hand movements, it's not something that anyone wants to see. And again, we can talk about the game once we get past this conversation, but I do truly believe that it's getting to the point where he should retire from the game of football. It's gotten to the point where his health is significantly more important than a game. And Tua, although this wasn't the outcome that he wanted, and I'm sure that he's going to want to come out there and he's going to want to play football again. This is his life. Just got an insane contract. He obviously is dedicated to the game. Some things are bigger than football. And when you've experienced as many concussions as Tua has experienced and the severity of the concussions as well, it gets to the point where he needs to seriously consider stepping away from the game. That time versus Cincinnati was enough for all of us to come together and genuinely say to Tua, it's okay if you want to walk away from the game. Then it happens a third time against the Green Bay Packers. 3 concussions in the same season. 3 concussions in a lifetime is enough to permanently damage you. He goes last season, thank God we go injury free. and then week 2 already this level of concussion. To me, it's really that easy for me to say to him, I love you as a football player. You are my favorite football player to watch, but it'd be selfish of me to want him to play on a football field, especially after a night like tonight. But enough of the tragedy stories. Of course, we know that my heart will be with Tua. I'm praying for Tua. I'm sure I really want to see him play football again, but understand that maybe it's not the best idea. But let's try to talk about this game a little bit. Um, Prior to the injury, of course, Tua did not have that great of a game. Had 3 interceptions, one for a pick six, one early on that I don't believe was his fault. That kind of just set the tone for the game, and then on defense, the Dolphins got to stop to start the second half, but in that first half, 5 drives, 4 scoring drives. They were dominating on the ground. James Cook had himself an awesome game. If we want to talk about fantasy football, you must be smiling ear to ear if you're a James Cook manager, because he was really the only one on the Buffalo Bills side of the ball that really did anything of significance for fantasy football, of course. Josh Allen really didn't have to do much, went to cruise control, 13 of 19, 139 yards. Did have that touchdown to James Cook, but when it got into double digit score, excuse me, when they were up 14 points, Josh Allen really didn't have to do much. Kind of just gave the ball to James Cook and let him do the rest. James Cook, I mean, what a performance from him. He goes out there, 78 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, which ties his season total of last year in one game. And of course, did have that receiving touchdown on their first possession. This was a great showing from the Buffalo Bills. This was a statement showing from the Buffalo Bills, especially after looking as bad as they did against the Arizona Cardinals. Of course, coming back, but starting as slow as they did, the Buffalo Bills sent the statement to the league. Even prior to his injury, they were out there and they were dominating this game. Every moment, it seemed as if this was the Buffalo Bills game for the taking. They never let up on offense and defense. They were making things very difficult for Tua and company, playing too high, taking the big plays away from them, playing man coverage, and really getting physical with both Waddle and Tyreek Hill, forcing them to go out there and make plays to I'm blanking on the guy who they threw that first ball to, that him and Tua have damn near no reps. The interception overthrown to Chosen Anderson. It was just a great performance all around by the Buffalo Bills. But strictly talking about fantasy football, you have James Cook for the Buffalo Bills, and that's about it. On the opposite side, Devon Achane. I think even when we talk about how this injury affects Tua and the Miami Dolphins long term, I think Devon Achane is still safe regardless. You saw how he was with Skylar Thompson, still getting peppered in the passing game, still was efficient in the run game. He had himself a great ball game, 22 carries, 96 yards, 7 catches, 7 targets, brought in every ball that he was thrown, goes for 69 yards, if I'm not mistaken, or 65 yards, and gets into the end zone as well. He's safe as can be. Devon Achane is one of the most explosive players in the league. He is an amazing receiving back on top of that as well. He sees every hole. He goes and he goes right through them. And every single time, too, it seems as if he's breaking a tackle or evading a tackle. He's just such an elusive guy that, to me, even after the Tua injury, to me, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, those aren't the safest guys to me. The safest guy is Devon Achane.
Yeah, I mean, if you're telling people at the start of the season that Devon Achane is going to average 23 touches in his first 2 games, this is a guy that's probably getting drafted as a top 5 running back. You probably would have Bijan, Brees, CMC, and he probably would have been drafted number 4, likely over Jahmyr Gibbs, who was going into the season with this hamstring injury. The amount of usage he's gotten, even with Raheem Mostert in game 1, and then, of course, we kind of now have a new ceiling for Devon Achane, right? When Raheem Mostert was ruled out of this game, you were expecting Jeff Wilson or Jalen Wright to have a pretty decent role in this offense, right? We knew Achane was going to be the number 1, but we were expecting a Mostert-like kind of snap share and usage from these other guys, and that just wasn't the case. You mentioned Achane had 22 carries. Jalen Wright had 5, and he had 4 yards with it. You have Jeff Wilson, who didn't even register a single rushing attempt in this game. This was all Devon Achane. And if Achane is going to get 20 to 30 touches per game, which is still on the high end, what we've seen throughout his career so far is if you're giving him a minimum of 12 to 15, he could be a top 15 guy, top 10 guy. If you're going to give him 20 plus, there is a path to RB1 overall. Of course, the fear with HN is already what happened. You get 1 week into the season, week two, he's already picking up an injury. And basically, every time he gets tackled in this game, you're kind of holding your breath, hoping he doesn't get hurt because that's kind of been his career so far. But as long as this guy is healthy, absolute obvious must start week to week, probably a top 5 to top 7 guy, regardless of matchup. But I do think this is where we have to kind of talk about going forward what Miami looks like because HN, I agree, is the safest out of all of this bunch. Tyreek Hill in this game was non-existent, even with Tua, with Skyler, 3 catches for 24 yards. Jalen Waddle used a bit more, but only 4 for 40. Jalen Waddle gets bumped down to like a flex spot. And in most cases, you probably want to look in other places because Skyler Thompson is not a good quarterback. Interested to see if Miami goes out there, maybe calls up Ryan Tannehill or a potential replacement because we really don't know how long Tua is going to be out for. And you can't win games with Skyler Thompson, at least not against teams that aren't like the New York Giants, Carolina Panthers. You can't beat top 20 teams in the NFL with Skylar Thompson at quarterback. So Tyreek Hill week to week is going to be in your starting lineup because it's Tyreek Hill and you probably don't have another choice unless you drafted an absolute loaded team. Tyreek Hill is going to be in the starting lineup. So I do think the conversation more so is Jalen Waddle. And to me, week to week, it's a flex play. And I think most times it's going to be other flexes that I like more than Jalen Waddle. To quickly talk about Buffalo, you mentioned it. James Cook, superstar game, 3 touchdowns, has that big 40 to 50-yard touchdown. Of course, has the receiving one to kick off the game. Outside of that, Khalil Shakir in back-to-back games has been pretty reliable. Full point
Agreed.
PPR. He's been a guy that's had double-digit points. Dalton Kincaid, the star of this game, looked fantastic. The first 2 plays were scripted for him, getting him out in space. He got a little dinged up in the middle of the game, but after that, only 2 catches from really that first drive on was not utilized as much. And yet again, game one, the Buffalo Bills threw the ball 23 times. Game two, Josh Allen had 19 attempts today. This is a team that we discussed. They want to run the ball. This defense, especially in this game, was able to hold it down, force multiple turnovers where Buffalo doesn't even have to really go on.
Oh, did we lose Dehls? Wow, here I am thinking that it was me because usually my connection goes out, but that's all right. I'll continue where he picked off. The Buffalo Bills offense is really going to be one that we're talking about primarily as a rush offense. And that's 100% okay because Josh Allen is an elite rushing option. And also, you pair that with the fact that James Cook has now asserted himself as one of the more efficient backs. And today, we saw them really rely on James Cook. 11 carries, over 70 yards, and how effective he was with his opportunity. And again, we've already spoken about what James Cook can do if he were to add the receiving element to his game. Right now, it's not seeming like that's a huge deal solely for the fact that he is such an effective rusher because he he is so multifaceted in the rushing game. He's able to break tackles. He has great vision. He's been excellent so far in this first 2 games, but in this game he really solidified that if he were to be the down to down back for the Buffalo Bills, that he can do an effective job and get the job done. Now, if we want to talk about Dalton Kincaid, to me, I'm not overly concerned about it because of how much they catered to him to start this game. However, it's unfortunate that 2 weeks in a row now, game one, we give him the pass because he was getting almost triple, double, quadruple teamed every single time that he stepped onto the football field and every single time that he was out there running a route. But in today's game, the first couple of plays, they did draw up for Dalton, but end of the day, the script was not there for the game to be an overly pass heavy one for the Buffalo Bills. So Dalton Kincaid going for the limited results that he did, 4 catches, brought in the 4 targets that they did see for 33 yards. So to me, again, I'm not going to overreact. I'm being kind to Dalton Kincaid because the script completely flipped on this game for any type of passing attack. So that being said, go ahead, Mr. Dehls. I thought, because usually it's my connection that messes up. So I'm here waiting. I'm like, oh man, is this on me? But
Nah,
go ahead, King.
yeah, in Florida, the lights just flickered. I was like, "What's going on?" Didn't know if they lost power for a second, but the Wi-Fi's out. I'm on my phone's hotspot. No promises what's going to go on for the rest of the show, but right now we're good. So I don't know the last thing I let off saying, but I know I was discussing just the Bills' kind of passing attack the last couple of games. 23 attempts in the first game, 19 attempts in the second game, and that changes the outlook on, I think, on a lot of these players, including Dalton Kincaid, who of course that was my guy. That's someone I was super high on. It's a positive, of course. They're trying to get him involved in the offense. That first drive, getting the ball in his hands twice back to back times. But now they have a team that they're kind of relying on James Cook a bit more. Khalil Shakir is bouncing back a bit more, or being more consistent, I should say. Keon Coleman, game one was fantastic. This game, really not as involved. I think only had 1 target, but still was out there for 90% of snaps. I am interested because just looking at their upcoming schedule, they have Jacksonville next week, the Ravens and the Texans, then the Jets the next 4 weeks. And you can make the argument, oh, these are going to be closer games. You don't have to throw the ball. But then I'm looking at game one, like you were losing that whole game and you still only had 23 pass
It's
attempts.
true.
So something we have to monitor going forward. But I think right now, when we're just looking at the landscape of tight ends, it's going to be hard to really find a replacement for Dalton Kincaid. So, I mean, if you're someone who goes out on the waiver wire, like the guys that are out there right now, you're looking at like Zach Ertz, like there's just not a lot of guys that you could start over Dalton Kincaid that could kind of give you that upside of having 7 for 70 yards and a touchdown, like we've seen it, times, at least during his rookie year so far, not this year. But yeah, overall, terrible situation for the Dolphins. Hopefully Tua could get back this year, man. We're going to get into our starts and our sits, so we'll probably move on from this. But just to my last thoughts is, I don't want to say his career's over because that's something that is such a big like leap to take and such a big decision to make over, these injuries he's just had over the last couple of seasons. It's not something like a player I think of is like Percy Harvin, who was dealing with concussions, but he also dealt with migraines. So there was more on top of it, but we really haven't seen a player, at least of Tua's caliber, who of course quarterback in the spotlight, we're seeing this game to game, that has had this many traumatic concussions, at least in kind of this era of the NFL post all of the, CT stuff where they got sued for, and post all of these rule changes where you can't hit the quarterback, you can't go high, can't go low. So, I mean, it's going to be a tough conversation. They said his family and friends were in the locker room with him. He was in good spirits, thank God, conscious. So, it doesn't seem like anything life threatening, but it's definitely injuries that alter your career. And I know Tua, had thoughts about that previously about how this is going to impact his career. He just signed that contract, and knowing who Tua is and knowing the guy he is, he wants to live up to that contract, right? It's not, I got my bread, I'm good. It's, I want to show Miami, I want to show the rest of the league, I want to show fans I'm worth $200 million. I should be in these conversations with Lamar and Joe Burrow and everyone else who got paid along the way. So, God willing, it's something he could come back from, maybe even come back from this season, still have a successful career. But this was just one that felt avoidable too. Like, I don't want to ramble, but it felt avoidable where, why are we going head first? Like, I know you're in this like in the middle of the game. I think that was a third or fourth down. He was well past the first down marker. Again, it's different when you're actually playing, but there's some where you get slammed to the ground and it's just the defender kind of just manhandling you. This one felt like you've done all that training. You did the jujitsu in the off season to kind of gracefully fall to the ground, and you throw it all away just to put your head straight down. Again, he's a competitor. You're in the middle of a game. You're trying to get yards. I'm not blaming him for it. But when you have that type of injury history, you just wished that's a time you just see him slide, or at least not go head first into DeMar Hamlin's chest.
Football's a brutal sport. We understand that. We all know that. And of course, the players know that themselves. That's what they sign up for. It's getting to the point, though, where you understand one more hit similar to that one, even though I agree with you. This one was 1000% the most avoidable of all the hits that Tua has taken that has led to a concussion. Definitely should have slid, but again, you're mentioning it. He's a gamer. It's a fourth down. They're losing by a good amount of points. He had just thrown a pick six. He's trying to make up for the mistakes that he had made in this game. So he's going out there trying to get every yard that he can possibly get. And of course, it leads to a terrible, terrible situation. But it's again, you see these start to pile up. How many more hits can he take? And it can be any type of hit that can trigger another reaction like this. If he's going to get sacked, it depends. Like it doesn't even need to be a sack where a D lineman is hitting them at 100% or 70%. Anything can kind of trigger that. So that's where it gets to the point where I'm at, where I think it's in his best interest. It's not worth it. Retire. You have your money. You are set for life. And I know that maybe for him, it may not be about the money. For some players, it's not about the money and strictly for the love of the game. And I respect the hell out of that. But you get one life. At the end of the day, football is going to go on with or without you. And at a point, you need to put yourself first. But again, I'm with you. Let's move on to a better positive note. Let's move on to our starts and sits of the week. I'll start us off here, Mr. Dehls, and it's going to be with our quarterback position. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to double down on my start of the week last week, and I'm going to make him my start of the week again this week. I'm talking about Baker Mayfield versus the Detroit Lions. Now, last week versus the Washington Commanders, I said I wasn't throwing pizza parties over that start of the week because the Washington Commanders are and probably will be again the worst secondary in football. Were last year and probably have a strong chance of being the worst secondary again. He goes out there, picks them apart, 289, 4 touchdowns. He did whatever he wanted against them. Now, this week versus the Detroit Lions, a much better opponent. However, I'm not bought in on this secondary, truthfully. I watched Terry and Arnold go out there and get gashed. I watched Carlton Davis go out there and look not anywhere near the level of player that Detroit went and traded out for. I don't know if I trust this secondary, which is why I look at the result of how Baker Mayfield looked, not only in week one, but also the performance that he put forth against them in the playoffs. 349, threw for 3 touchdowns, did turn the ball over twice, did have 2 INTs, but had a 94.5 passer rating, 64% completion percentage. I believe he's going to go out there, and of course there is that chip on his shoulder. Hey, we lost to these guys in the playoffs. They stopped our trip to ultimately reach our end goal. Baker Mayfield's got something to play for. And on top of him already playing at a very high level and showed that they can play at a high level without Dave Canales, I'm very excited for what Baker Mayfield can do again in week 2. And it's going to be getting to a point where is Baker Mayfield one of my guys? Because now we got 2 weeks in a row where I'm vouching for him.
Love the Baker start this week. I'm going with Jaden Daniels as my start of the week going up against the New York Giants. Don't look now. Jaden Daniels on pace for 1,500 rushing yards. Just saying, 1,500 rushing yards would damn near double RG3's record of 800 and change some years ago, again with the Commanders, but they were named a different team at the time that we no longer say. But if his usage in week 1 is any indication of what Jaden Daniels is going to be in the future, he has top 5 upside. Realistically, his rookie season last week, 16 carries for 88 yards, including multiple goal line carries, had the 2 rushing touchdowns. And one of the bigger topics after this game was the coaching staff. I think it was actually Dan Quinn said they don't want Jaden Daniels rushing the ball as much, right? 16 carries does seem like a ton, but it's just Jaden Daniels' instinct to run the ball, especially when he's pressured. In college, his final year at LSU in 2023, he scrambled 32% of the time when pressured. That jumped to 50% in week 1 against the Bucs. So while there are going to be designed runs in this offense, and that's something you can limit, of course, you have the ability to control that. It's when you're actually dropping back to pass and you get pressured. Jaden Daniels, half the time in week 1, took off to scramble. How that looks for his longevity in the NFL, that's something that's questionable because we've seen a lot with mobile quarterbacks. But when it comes to fantasy, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a guy that's willing to take off, and it's not great for the running backs. It's not good for the receivers who really eat in the short an intermediate part of the field, but it's great for that quarterback. And if the passing ever comes close to what the rushing is, right? He only had, I think he completed what, 17 of 21, if that was correct in the first game. So he was accurate, but didn't have a ton of yardage. If he's able to have a game where he has 250 plus passing yards and he's giving you 10 to 15 rushing attempts with attempts around the goal line, this is where you start to see the path of him being one of the lead options in fantasy. I still think in some matchups when you're going up against top defenses, he's probably still someone I'm not excited to start just because I do worry about his processing and just taking a lot of sacks more so than being able to get out and run. But although the Giants pass rush is really strong, Commanders' offensive line is going to struggle. They're going to be able to get pressure on him, but I think Daniels will have no problem being able to make something happen out of it.
Now I gotta be honest, Mr. Dehls. I'm a sick man because I contemplated making the man on the opposite side of the game my start of the week.
I don't hate it.
But because he goes out there and he balls against the Commanders. But I found a little bit of a loophole, and we'll go over that later in another start of the week. But let's go into our quarterback sit of the week. Mine, I contemplated. I was between two guys, but decided to take the little bit more bolder name because the one guy I was contemplating between was Geno Smith versus New England. I watched how New England treated my actual sit of the week, and that's going to be Joe Burrow versus the Kansas City Chiefs. And I wanted to go that route with Geno, but felt how many people are really going out there and Geno Smith is their quarterback one? I know if we're talking two quarterback leagues, yeah, my conversation is a little bit more valid. However, Joe Burrow is a lot of people's quarterback one. He's an amazing football player. He's extremely talented, but he did not show that in week one. He went for 164 yards versus New England, 0 touchdowns, 0 INTs, had a 70% completion percentage, really didn't do anything over the top. He was a big take what the defense was giving you, check down, check down, check down, check down. He did have a touchdown that was dropped by Mike Gesicki. He had another play where the receiver just goes, he gets it punched, he fumbles as well. That could have been a big play. But ultimately, he didn't do enough to get the job done. Now I look at this week versus the Kansas City Chiefs, and I look at the pressure that Joe Burrow did receive in that New England game. I think that's going to be replicated in this one. Kansas City is going to make it very difficult on Joe Burrow, force him into similar situations that he was forced into with New England. And it's going to be a lot of taking the underneath and taking what the defense is giving you. And against Kansas City, obviously that's not going to be enough. And Chris Jones is going to live in the backfield. He's going to make it a very long day for Joe Burrow. And right now I'm in one of those where I need to see Cincinnati get back on track before I start to really feel confident in them. And it's not a great matchup in week 2 to find your way back onto the track with of course Kansas City and their level of defense. So for me, I'm waiting another week. I know what they're capable of, but against Kansas City, you have Jamar Chase, who obviously is working his way back to being at 100%, but probably no T. Higgins. I really don't love the current state of Cincinnati, but this week I'm definitely playing it safe, and I'm sitting Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I have a league where I have Joe Burrow and I have Jaden Daniels in a one quarterback league. I'm starting Jaden Daniels and I'm not really thinking twice about it. What Burrow has shown in week 1, just historically, the first 2 weeks of the season, he hasn't been a guy that produces in real life and he hasn't been a guy that produces for fantasy. So, very shortly though, it will come around and Jamar Chase will be out there a little bit more and T. Higgins, knock on wood, is going to start practicing again and be out there, and Joe Burrow will be back to his top 10 fantasy self. But for these first couple of weeks, I agree with you. I would definitely be more excited to start a guy like Jaden Daniels than Joe Burrow. Moving on to my quarterback sit, it's going to be Trevor Lawrence going up against the Cleveland Browns. The Browns defense is still elite. Don't get it twisted. You go on that box score and they let up 30 points to the Dallas Cowboys. Oh my God, this Browns defense. The Cowboys, even in the first half, when this was a close-ish game, they were not a consistent offense. They were not a consistent passing game. Dak finished with just 19 of 31 throwing, 180 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. This was not someone who was out there dominating the Browns through the passing attack. And I don't know when we have to have the conversation, but the Jaguars coaching staff doesn't really make things easy for Trevor Lawrence. A lot of it is difficult. They were 29th in motion in week 1. The only teams that were less than them, the Browns, the Patriots, and the Panthers, who all had abysmal offensive performances in week 1. And the game plan last week was weird as well. After ETN fumbled, the Jaguars had only one pass attempt. They were up double digits. So I understand you want to chew the clock. You don't want to give Miami chances on offense, but they had 3 drives of offense and only 1 pass attempt. There's a reason why they lost that game, right? It's not just the ETN fumble because you're still up double digits after that. It's the game plan after that. And for whatever reason, not having faith in your number 1 overall pick, who is your franchise quarterback. So pair that with a really tough matchup going up against Cleveland. I am excited to see what Brian Thomas can do. You sent me a very intriguing trade offer. I will give you that. That was something I looked at and stared at and really thought. You offered me Ramondre Stevenson. Great offer. Brian Thomas, to me, has league-winning upside as a wide receiver. He's someone to me that when you look at rookie wide receivers over the year, he's not hyped up like Jamar Chase or Marvin Harrison, and he shouldn't have been. He's not the level of prospect. But what we've seen is rookie wide receivers come into the league, and especially down the stretch in the second half of the season, they really come on. And the fact that he had 50 yards and a touchdown, his game one, just shows kind of the talent he has going up against Jalen Ramsey, being able to beat him one-on-one. But this is about Trevor Lawrence. Sitting Trevor Lawrence this week, I would much rather start a guy like my star of the week or yours in Baker Mayfield or Jaden Daniels.
So does that mean I'm not getting Brian Thomas?
I did not decline it. Accept it.
I hate when you do shit like that. But I knew it was a fair offer. That's all I sent. I got a bad reputation, but I like to think I send fair offers. I want to get shit done. But of course, I understand not accepting it. We're both huge Brian Thomas Jr. fans. We understand the talent. We understand the upside. As you're the wide receiver 1 in Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence throwing you the football, that's obviously something that intrigues all fantasy managers. But let's go out here. This is probably the one that I'm most excited for. My running back start of the week, J.K. Dobbins. It's time, Joel. And we've been here. We've always believed, but it was a matter of J.K. Dobbins just staying healthy and being on the football field. Last week versus the Raiders, 10 touches. That's all he needed, Joel. That's all he needed. 135 yards, 13.5 yards a carry for those that can't do math. Gets into the end zone, had 2 rushes of over 20 plus yards. He's here. It's time to fire up the troops and get ready to go to war. J.K. Dobbins at the front of the line. And he's going up against the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers are bad. They are not a good team. They're probably the worst team in the National Football League. And the Los Angeles Chargers are going to do whatever they want against them. And I can see Justin Herbert having himself a great game also. However, they are a team that have made it very evident we want to be a run-first team. And with this offensive line, as great as it had shown to be in week 1 with Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt-Delete, they're going to get a ton of push, especially with unfortunate events of Derek Brown missing a lot of time with injury. This defensive line is already not great to begin with. They graded out as the 16th best rush defense, but we understand the dominating performance that the Saints put forth against them. Alvin Kamara, who hasn't been efficient or wasn't efficient last season, came out opening day and was extremely efficient on the ground, was great in the passing game as well, was able to get into the end zone. I'm expecting a repeat performance out of this from J.K. Dobbins, one of my favorite plays this week. A guy asked me, do I start Devonta Smith this week versus the Falcons, or do I send J.K. Dobbins out there versus the Carolina Panthers? And I didn't hesitate. And I love Smitty. I said, you send J.K. Dobbins out there and you don't think twice.
I like that start. Let me give you a few other names at the running back position. Tell me if you're starting J.K. Dobbins over them.
Okay.
Isaiah Pacheco going up against the Bengals.
Yeah, you're doing this for yourself, and I respect the hell out of that. I will most definitely start Isaiah Pacheco.
Okay. We might talk about him in a couple seconds here as well. Alvin Kamara going up against the Cowboys.
Oh, I see that one. I understand it. I would lean J.K. Dobbins right now this week.
Okay. How about Ramondre Stevenson going against the Seahawks?
I like J.K. Dobbins a little bit more.
Rachaad White going against the Lions.
Give me J.K. Dobbins.
David Montgomery going against the Bucks.
Tampa Bay. Yeah. That one's tough because Monty's going to get his inevitable 15 for 70, get into the end zone maybe. Ooh, I lean JK, but close. This one was the closest one outside of AK.
Yeah, I have JK. I'm torn between JK and Mark Andrews in my final flex spot. Haven't really made a decision yet. And I think Gus Edwards too. If you have Gus Edwards on your team, I think he's a fine start as well. If you're really in a pinch for an RB2, you had someone that went down to injury or just in a deeper league, I think Gus Edwards, although it's not very inspiring, he'll probably get a couple touches around the goal line. He'll probably get touches within the 20s. And this is a terrible defense who just lost their best player in Derek Brown for the year. So they're probably not going to be able to stop either of these guys. My running back star of the week, though, as I mentioned, it's going to be Isaiah Pacheco going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. It's really a luxury for any running back these days to be able to go against the Bengals defense. They allowed 120 rushing yards on 25 carries to Ramondre Stevenson. And this is the thing about Pacheco. He's not the most efficient running back in the world. He's not the most explosive running back in the world. But one thing he can do is break tackles. And the Bengals had an awfully difficult time taking down Ramondre Stevenson in that week one matchups. After the game, Lou Anarumo said the Bengals missed 14 tackles in week one. I don't know if the numbers back that up, but the defensive coordinator went out there and said, yeah, we did a terrible job trying to
Unfortunately,
wrap
Dehls
up
is probably going to get
Ramondre
lost here.
Stevenson. Huh? Oh,
Lost here.
hello? Hello?
You're good, bro. Keep going.
Sorry,
Keep
Florida
pushing.
Wi-Fi. Here we go. But the other most intriguing and I think hopeful stat for Isaiah Pacheco, he was on the field for 80% of snaps in this game. That's the second highest mark of his career. I believe last year, week 16 or 17, it was like 90% of snaps, just a complete outlier game. This game, though, week one, 80%. I am interested to see how does Samaje Perine fit in this offense as he gets more accustomed. But what we saw week one against Baltimore was Pacheco is going to be out there first and second down. He's going to play a lot on third down. He's going to play in the 2-minute drill. So just the opportunity he has in this offense in such a great matchup. Last week, he got saved a bit by that touchdown because he only had around 50, 55 rushing yards. But this is a week where he could creep up to that 70 to 80 rushing yards mark, as well as get a touchdown and finish probably a top 12 running back.
I'll tell you what, bro. We had a chance, an opportunity to go out there and make Kyron Williams our start of the week after a pretty solid week one, of course, against Detroit.
He's still
But a lot of naysayers, a lot of them this offseason, the real always believed, and he went out there and balled against Detroit. And what he's going to do against the Arizona Cardinals is not going to be legal. However, let's move into our RB sits of the week. This one was pretty simple for me as well. DeAndre Swift went out there and laid a dud versus the Titans. Now this week, they go up against the Houston Texans on prime time. Now, Jonathan Taylor scored a touchdown. That saved what was a pretty horrendous showing from him. 16 attempts, 48 yards, 3 yards a carry, and his longest rush of the day was 7 yards. He really was churning out those mid-ass runs, but the Texans did a great job of limiting him and his production. Now, DeAndre Swift, obviously, we understand that the offense as a whole for the Chicago Bears was not really good at all. Caleb Williams really couldn't pass the ball, really didn't have that strong connection with either a DJ Moore or Keenan Allen or even a DeAndre Swift, who we thought would be a little bit more active in the passing game, had one target, didn't bring it in. He only was able to accumulate 30 yards on 10 touches, 3 yards a carry as well. And I know that Tennessee has a really good defensive line and a pretty solid rush defense as well. But I'm looking at this matchup and I understand that I think that their main goal is going to be to pass the football because the Houston Texans secondary is definitely the weak point of their defense. I don't love Swift in this matchup, understanding that he was probably a lot of people's RB2s being drafted. I don't love the matchup this week. I'm staying away.
My running backs of the week is going to be Aaron Jones going up against the San Francisco 49ers. It's a really tough matchup going up against that Niners front. On average, Breece Hall's first contact by a 49ers defender was behind the line of scrimmage. Now, Breece Hall is a freak of nature, so he was able to overcome that and not have a single negative rush. But Aaron Jones, for how efficient he was in week one, don't know if he's going to have the same sort of success. As I mentioned, against the Giants, he was fantastic, averaged 6.7 yards per carry, just stuff Aaron Jones is able to do, over 100 yards and a touchdown. He was phenomenal. But this defense is going to be a little bit different. This is a defense that's going to make the Minnesota Vikings uncomfortable, Sam Darnold uncomfortable, and it's going to be a negative game script. Going up against the Giants, this was a game where they were leading basically from start to finish. Aaron Jones was able to get 14, 15 carries. I don't know if we're going to see that outcome in this game. So the running back position is still pretty shallow, I should say. Would you start Aaron Jones or J.K. Dobbins? I think that's the place I would go Dobbins.
Okay. I think I would also lean Dobbins, but man, this guy Aaron Jones just finds a way to be effective and be one of the more efficient backs, especially when he's healthy. I feel like as a talent, Aaron Jones is better than JK. That's not a question to me.
I agree.
But the matchup is so juicy for J.K. Dobbins and the Panthers, truthfully.
Yeah, so the Niners were able to dominate the Jets offensive line, who we thought was going to be a stronger unit going into this season. And I don't look at that Vikings unit saying that they're going to be able to dominate that Niners front. So Aaron Jones is a guy that, again, if you're in a pinch, it's your RB2, not the end of the world, but there might be some better options out there for this week.
So my sit of the week, or excuse me, we're going to go wide receiver start of the weeks. My start of the week for the wide receiver position was easy until it was made difficult because of the recent injury report. Now, my start of the week is going to be Malik Neighbors versus the Commanders. I think regardless, he does play. But this secondary is horrendous, and you can expect a lot of me every single time I see a matchup versus the Commanders for me to put a player in this exact spot, whether it's my wide receiver or quarterback. One of the two are being placed at the start of the weeks. Think about how bad Daniel Jones was against Minnesota. I even still contemplated making him my start of the week at quarterback. That's how bad the Commanders secondary is. But Malik Neighbors led all rookies in receiving yards last week in a game that the Giants had no chance of winning at a certain point in time. But Malik Neighbors still did impress, was still able to bring in a decent amount of catches, although it wasn't anything insane. I think it was 50, 55, 59 yards, one of the two. But still, Daniel Jones still did give him opportunity. And Daniel Jones, although not good, in 7 games versus the Commanders, has 10 passing touchdowns to 3 INTs, does have one on the ground. But it shows that against the Commanders, that's one of the few teams that he does go out there and does play his highest level of football. So I am really anticipating this to be the breakout game for Malik. I am making him my start of the week. But the other guy, you know what? I'll wait till you give your start of the week before I show him some love. But again, I'm saying this because Malik Neighbors is on the injury report. That is something to be mindful of. However, I still do think that he does go out there and suits up.
Yeah, before I saw your list, I was definitely eyeing up Malik Neighbors. He had in his debut, it was like 60 something yards, right? Which isn't anything phenomenal, but for a rookie debut, it was like top 5 all time. It just goes to show like it's hard to start off and just get 100 yards and a touchdown like a lot of people want from someone who's that talented and got so much hype. But my wide receiver started the week this week. Say it again.
66 yards that he had.
Yeah, 66. Again, it's something like, 66, whatever. But in the grand scheme of things, it was an elite start to his career. DJ Moore going up against the Texans is going to be my star of the week. I'm not panicked yet on this offense by any means. Going into week 2, the Bears are likely going to be without Rome Odunze. There's a pretty good chance Keenan Allen's not going to be 100%. I still lean that he's going to play. Keenan Allen's the type of player that doesn't have to practice, maybe getting limited on Friday, but since he's a vet, he knows his body well. He could still be out there on the field, but even if he is, he's not going to be at 100%, which puts DJ Moore firmly back into the role as basically the only passing option on this offense. And the Texans look like in week 1, they can be exposed. Anthony Richardson had some magic, had some voodoo where he was able to make throws that a lot of quarterbacks, probably including Caleb, can't make. But I think what we did see was this was a team that can get attacked down the field. Alec Pierce beat them deep 3 catches, 125 yards. Ashton Doolin had a big catch. A.D. Mitchell should have had multiple big catches, as we mentioned on constant podcasts and fantasy reaction shows. I like this matchup for him. This is a game that I think the Texans are going to be leading. The Bears are going to have to come back from. And although I'm like 70% confident the Bears offense is going to look better than what it did last week because 90 yards just feels like impossible for this talented as a quarterback and wide receiver room. More than anything, I like the game script of this game where the Bears are keeping up with CJ Stroud and this passing attack. We know DeAndre Swift is the number 1 there in the running back room, but we saw in week 1, he wasn't able to get that effective. 3 yards per carry is not something you're going to lean on and feed a guy when you have Caleb Williams and DJ Moore. So I know if you drafted him the first week, he gets out targeted by Keenan Allen. Keenan has 11 targets. DJ Moore only has about 40 yards. But I think this matchup against the Texans with some injuries to the other guys, I think it's a really strong start.
Now let's move on to our sits of the week at the wide receiver position. And to me, this one was pretty simple. It's George Pickens versus the Denver Broncos. We saw what Pat Surtain just did to DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf was blanketed because of Pat Surtain being probably the best man-to-man corner in football. 29 yards, DK Metcalf finished with 3 catches. Now, George Pickens is a big play guy. He's able to go out there and one play is all it takes to salvage a performance. He had 6 catches, 85 yards, but did have that big 40-yard catch that definitely did salvage a performance. So for me, I look at that matchup, understand that the Steelers really struggled for any type of offense versus the Atlanta Falcons. I think the Atlanta Falcons are a respectable defense. However, I look at the performance we just put forth against Seattle, the pressure that we were able to get on Geno Smith. I think that we really will be able to make things difficult for not only just George Pickens, but the entire Steelers defense as a whole. But when you match up one-on-one versus the best man-to-man corner in football, it's a recipe for me to put you on my bench. And that's what I'm going to be doing with George Pickens.
My sit this week is going to be Zay Flowers going up against the Las Vegas Raiders. There are certain matchups I want Zay in, and there's going to be other ones I'm avoiding him. I was not going into this year thinking Zay Flowers is someone who's kind of a locked and loaded wide receiver too, but rather someone who is a matchup dependent flex option week to week. And this feels like a game where the Ravens are huge favorites in this game, coming off a loss, historically have won games by like 2+ touchdowns in the Lamar Jackson, Jim Harbaugh era. And this is a game, in my opinion, that Derrick Henry is going to feast. It's going to be 20 to 25 plus carries. It's not going to be a game where the Baltimore Ravens are going to have to play catch up or play from behinds. Ladd McConkey, who plays a similar-ish roles to Zay Flowers in terms of it's a lot of underneath stuff. Ladd had an ADOT of 6 in week 1. Zay Flowers about 4.4. So not someone who's going to be beating you down the field. Ladd really didn't do much. He got saved with that touchdown, but outside of that had 5 receptions for 39 yards. In full PPR leagues, right? In full PPR, I think Zay Flowers is a fine start because you're probably guaranteed like 5 to 6 receptions in this offense in the screen game, intermediate. But in half PPR or standard, a couple guys I would be looking to start over him. Jamison Williams, I think, has a fantastic matchup this week going up against the Bucs and their secondary. And Chris Godwin in that same game going up against the Detroit Lions. We saw Chris Godwin playing the slot about 65% of snaps, which is something we were looking forward to this season, and was able to feast against, again, the Washington Commanders, who is going to let everyone feast this year. But those are two guys that I think you're probably deciding between Zay Flowers and probably that wide receiver like 24 to 32 range in that flex option. And I think both of those guys just have a higher upside in a game that's going to have some more scoring.
Now, let's move on to the tight end position, which was probably the worst that we've ever seen it in week 1. I mean, you had the tight end 8 and tight end 10 have single digits. It really was pretty terrible. And it's someone who vouches for the tight end position. I felt like they slapped me in the face. However, let's go to the tight end start of the week for me. I'm going with Isaiah Likely. I'm staying with the hot hand here. I say this to make him my start of the week, to really put it to the masses. Last week was not a fluke performance. I've been here preaching about Isaiah Likely for a good amount of time, saying that he needs to be one of the main focal points of this Ravens offense. It needs to be a 12 personnel lineup almost every single time they're out there, because Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely are 2 of the 3 best weapons for the Baltimore Ravens. Of course, I'm going to respect Zay Flowers. I believe that he is one of those 3. But we saw how big of a player Isaiah Likely can be and how great of a playmaker he is versus the Kansas City Chiefs. That play that Lamar Jackson scrambling outside the pocket, Isaiah Likely makes that the play that it is, truthfully. Not a great ball by Lamar Jackson. He goes up there and gets it. And then his yards after the catch, his ability to go and take it all the way to the crib. He was an inch away from solidifying himself as one of the best performances in fantasy football, period, last week, with, of course, the touchdown that would have gave them, the Baltimore Ravens, a chance to either tie or take the lead with a 2-point conversion. Isaiah Likely is going to be featured in this offense for the rest of the season. I do firmly believe that. Was one of Lamar Jackson's favorite targets to close last season. We saw it in week 1. He was his favorite target, period. I'm looking for that to continue in week 2. They ran I believe he ran 4 less routes than Mark Andrews and was obviously able to put up the stat sheet that he was able, or was able to stuff the stat sheet as much as he was versus KC. I'm expecting the same thing versus the Raiders. I'm expecting Mark Andrews to have a little bit better of a game for sure, with of course him being one of the bigger disappointments last weekend. However, Isaiah Likely is simply too good for him not to continue to be a main piece to this offense.
We're going to be making fantasy reaction history right now because my start of the week at the tight end position is
Mark
someone who you
Andrews.
had as your sit of the week.
No
I'm not scared
way.
of Brock Bowers going up against the Ravens. I'm really not scared. To look at all of the other tight ends around the league and to think I have the luxury of sitting Brock Bowers, you better have one of those top 5 guys because he was too involved in week 1 to be scared of him. He led the team in targets, he led the team in receptions, and was just 3 yards away from leading the teams in yards. He ran 20 snaps from the slot, 0 snaps as a pass blocker. They were all as a receiver, getting out and getting busy down the field compared to all of the other tight ends in the league. He was second in receptions, second in yards. His 11.8 fantasy points in his debut is the second best ever for a rookie tight end. Brock Bowers is one of the best tight end prospects we have ever seen. And the Raiders are making a concerted effort. We saw it in the preseason. We saw it in week 1. We're going to use him in multiple spots. He will be in line. He will be in the slot. He even got, I think, 1 or 2 snaps out wide. I understand the Baltimore defense. It's a fantastic defense. They're going to be able to shut down a lot of what the Raiders want to do. But Brock Bowers is way too involved in this offense, and he's too talented to be able to sit. The only guys I'm starting over Brock Bowers, you're looking at Laporta, you're looking at Trey McBride, Travis Kelce. I'm talking about the legit 5 to 6 guys in the league. So if you're looking at Brock Bowers, if you don't have one of those top 5 to 6 guys, he is in my starting lineup.
Now, I love Brock Bowers. I say this as a Broncos fan, of course, but I love him as a talent. I have a lot of stock in Brock Bowers. A matchup versus the Baltimore Ravens isn't one that I'm looking at, and I'm trying to fire up a rookie. And I understand that he did have a very respectable performance against the Los Angeles Chargers, 6 for 58, especially as a rookie. You mentioned it, how rookie wide receivers, Malik Neighbors had an all-time rookie performance, and for a tight end, that's pretty great. And you understand that they are moving him all over the football field. However, the Baltimore Ravens defense is simply too good. When you have Roquan Smith, who's one of the better coverage linebackers in football also, that's probably going to be a matchup that we see more often than not. Although, again, they were getting creative. They were putting them all over the football field. That can be a saving grace for Brock Bowers, but it's a fear of mine to start him versus the Baltimore Ravens. That's really where it stems from. And I look at these other guys and their matchups. I'm not going to sit Trey. I'm not sitting Laporta. I'm not sitting Kittle. I'm not sitting all these top guys. Kyle Pitts, even though maybe that was one that I flirted with to make him my sit of the week last week, he didn't have a great matchup versus Pittsburgh, was able to still find the end zone, although he didn't have that great of a day outside of that. A touchdown is sometimes all that it can take. But in this matchup versus Philadelphia, I like that. Even though Bond and Nolan look.
Not mine this time. I don't think it's mine. I think I'm still here. Can someone let me know in the comments? Is it me or is it Drew? Anyone? We got 300 people in here. Somebody's got to let me
We're
know
here.
if it's
We're
me or if
here.
it's
We're
Drew.
here. Don't worry about
Okay.
it. It's me.
I thought it was me.
No, don't worry about it. Understandable. I will say this: Brock Bowers. I'm just worried about the matchup. That's all it comes down to. I fear the Baltimore Ravens, especially with tight ends. So I respect you for doubling down, especially after you kind of made the mistake that I could potentially be making last week. You made him your sit of the week. He really didn't have that all-world performance, but for tight ends, pretty solid. It's just the Chargers are drastically different from the Ravens, and that's kind of where I see it.
Second best debut for a rookie tight end ever. That ain't
Respect
bad.
it. I respect
My
it.
sit of the week, though, at the tight end position, again, the tight end position is so damn shallow that I'm just looking at some maybe streaming options that you have out there because I'm not sitting in the top 7 guys, even a guy like Mark Andrews who might be dropping a lot of people's boards. He is starting over everyone. So a few different waiver wire targets that are out there. One name that's been out there on waiver wires is Pat Fryermuth. He was someone who I was kind of flirting with going into the season, being in Arthur Smith's system. I know there's potential he could have a breakout-ish season, 700-800 yards, maybe get 8 touchdowns and be a back-end tight end 1. But the usage in week 1 was there. but the overall passing game wasn't. He was second in targets, receptions, and yards on the team, but that resulted in just 5 fantasy points. A couple other options that are out there. Colby Parkinson, tight end of the Rams, going up against the Cardinals this week. I would rather start him than Pat Freiermuth. And Zach Ertz, tight end of the Commanders, who looked pretty decent, I thought, in his performance against the Buccaneers going up against the New York Giants. If you're looking for streaming options, say, for example, you had a guy like David Njoku who went down to injury, Dalton Schultz, who got a bit banged up, Jake Ferguson, who got a bit banged up, I would be looking at Parkinson or Zach Ertz over a guy like Pat Freiermuth.
Are we getting to the point where there are no tight end sits of the week? Are we just going out there and trusting that, you have to send someone out there and hope for the best at tight end at this point? Or
Like who Brock Bowers was just said the week. Who is the worst tight end you're starting over him?
God, maybe Kyle Pitts? Like, is that the worst? I'm being sincere. Let's see. Would I start
Would you
maybe
start Mark
Dallas
Andrews?
Goddard? Dallas Goddard, maybe going up against the Falcons. That might be the absolute worst I'd go. Mark
Evan
Andrews, I'd
Ingram?
probably start over him. Evan Ingram versus Cleveland. That was one I flirted with making my sit of the week too. But I think that we don't see another all-time shit performance from Evan Ingram where one catch for 4 yards. Trevor Lawrence and him have too much of a relationship for that to happen.
Yeah. And outside of that, like again, you got the top 6 guys, Kincaid, who we just saw, and then Andrews, McBride, Kittle, Kelsey, Laporta all starting, Kyle Pitts, Evan Ingram, Dallas Goddard. Like I'm starting Brock Bowers over all of those guys, including Kyle Pitts.
I had to make a tough decision, and I figured that's where I was going. But let's read some super chats, and if you guys have any questions, we'll answer them. Start sits. We got some time here. We'll probably go to the hour mark, so we'll read the first one. Of course, nothing. B swag. If you have a question, if you have anything you want to say, go ahead and put it in the comments. We'll read that. Of course, our brother Santos W Stream. Drew, I can feel your sadness the whole episode, and respect John. I cook y'all next. First off, you are an absolute legend when it comes to Twitter. You are a very, very special talent when it comes to editing our clips. We appreciate that because you help us out. But sadness wise, I just tried to be here and do the show, do a job because that's what I owe
That
to.
picture of you flipping off Rib was amazing. I love
That was
picture.
such a good,
Great picture. He's going to dab me up. Idiot.
The picture of you flipping off Riv and then the picture of me behind John just flipping off. I forgot that I did that, but
Yeah.
I believe that I did it. But again, I just try to do a job. You guys come here and you guys want to watch me and Joel talk about fantasy football, give our reaction to Thursday and Monday. So I owe that not just to you, but of course I owe that to Dehls. We got a job to do. But again, we'll start doing some start sit questions. Dave Mackey asks Chuba Hubbard, I'm assuming, or Javonte. Now, Javonte going up against, you are in a muddy situation. I will be transparent. This is bad. If I had to say, I would go, I think Chuba Hubbard's going to get opportunity versus the Chargers, but I think that game's going to get ugly regardless. I think for how close the game should be, I'll go Javonte because I feel like points are going to be hard for either team to come by. So I'll go with Javonte Williams there.
Yeah, I'm also going Javonte. Miles Sanders was getting involved in this offense. I know McLaughlin got involved in the passing game and in the rushing game. I'll be honest, brother. You're getting probably 4 to 5 points out of both of these guys, so don't stress about it. Flip a coin, whoever you want, put them in.
That's pretty terrible. AJ Baines asks, likely or Pitts? I'm leaning likely, although Pitts is a decent option too. Pitts going up against the Eagles is honestly a pretty decent matchup. I think that if there was a time for Pitts to have a solid game, it would be versus the Eagles, but I feel like I'm riding the hot hand, and that's why I would lean Isaiah.
Yeah, that's tough. I'm really interested to see what Isaiah Likely does this week. Of course, he's the hottest name off the waiver wire. Kyle Pitts was out there 100% of snaps, or excuse me, 100% of routes. When they were out there throwing the ball, Kyle Pitts was out there running, going up against those linebackers. I think I would lean Pitts here. But again, it's a scary offense to be a part of because if Kirk Cousins looked like he did in week 1, he's gonna need a touchdown to save his game.
AJ also asked, Rachaad White or Brian Robinson? Brian Robinson obviously going up against the Giants. Rachaad White going up against the Lions. I like Brian Robinson in this matchup versus the Giants. We just saw Aaron Jones really be uber efficient, did have a touchdown as well. Eileen Bryan obviously was getting a lot of opportunity as well versus the Buccaneers. I just like his matchup a little bit more than Rachaad White, who is an inefficient rusher. And we saw Bucky Irvin really cut into his touches also. That's one thing that I'm monitoring as well.
Yeah, I like Bucky Irvin a lot. He was far more efficient than Rachaad White. I go Brian Robinson too. Great matchup against the Giants.
John Hendricks asks Kyle Pitts or Brian Robinson. Another one. This is a
I'm
tough
going
one.
Brian Robinson.
Yeah, I get it, but Pitts.
Guaranteed workload, good matchup.
That Pitts versus the Eagles is actually a decent matchup, but I
No,
will
for
be
sure.
going. I will be going Brian Robinson. I just think the Giants' defense, especially the rush defense, isn't the greatest. Angel Martinez asks Dobbins or Pittman in a flex. Ooh, ooh.
I don't love the Pittman matchup going up against the Packers. I just think that's going to
Facts.
be an ugly, low-scoring game. And again, we saw Richardson attempt just 19 passes, complete just 9 passes. So you got to hope at least 3 of them go to Pittman, and all of a
Ugh.
sudden you're catching 33% of the passes. I would probably go Dobbins here in a great matchup.
My logic here is if I'm comfortable starting JK over Smitty, I'm comfortable sitting him over Pittman, who we don't know that the opportunity is going to be strictly for him. We saw AR go and spread the love to Pierce, to AD, to it doesn't matter. He was just out
Pastor
there and
Doolin.
singing to whoever was for sure. Doolin as well, getting the end zone as well. So I lean JK. I think that the play is just safer. DB Too Easy, shout out, said, would you start Wandale, Rashid Shaheed, Greg Dortch, or Sutton? Do not start Sutton. He's the last option here that I would start. Wandale is
PPR
intriguing,
league.
very intriguing, especially in PPR when we saw Wandale get double-digit targets. To me, that's who I'm leaning. But Dortch versus the Rams, sneaky, but
It
not
is.
sneaky enough. Rashichi is a big play waiting to happen, but against Dallas, I don't love the matchup this week. I would wait another week. He does have it in his bag to score, and I just don't think in PPR two, only 3 catches, he was able to turn it into 70 something yards. But Wandale is going to have a little bit more opportunity, a little bit more safe, in my opinion.
Yeah, Rashid Shaheed is the guy. Like, if you went up against James Cook on Thursday Night Football and you need some upside, I'd be cool starting Rashid Shaheed there. In week 1, Wandell did have 6 for 44. Greg Dortch had about the same stat line, but I do think Marv will probably be more involved, which makes me think Wandell going up against that Commander secondary.
Shout out to Jaden for the super chat. Said in a 10-man
That's it.
PPR, Zamir and Burrow were dropped. I'm assuming it's a dropped,
Zamir
right?
White.
Yeah. Burrow, one quarterback, maybe, I'm assuming. I have
Yeah.
Bijan, Travis, and AR. Should I drop my handcuff Algier for either? Yes. If so, which one?
I'm not really into Zamir White. I wasn't into
Neither am
Zamir White
I.
coming into the season, and week 1, Alexander Madison was eating into his workload a lot. I think I'd rather keep the handcuff of Algier. And in a 1 quarterback league, I don't need Joe Burrow if I have Anthony Richardson. When his bye comes up, we'll just find somebody else. And maybe that's the time you could drop Tyler Algier, because I don't know if there's going to be a lot of people in your league that are rushing to pick up Bijan's handcuff when he's been able to stay healthy basically his whole career, right? This isn't a guy like Blake Corum, for example, or Jordan Mason, who have guys in front of him who have a bit more of an injury history. So I would keep the guys you have. Keep Bijan, Travis, AR. Obviously, I mean, you're not dropping them, but don't drop the handcuff Algier for either of those guys.
Yeah, these are not attractive names, truthfully, for me to consider it. Bijan and Travis, although Travis didn't have the most efficient game, was still able to get into the end zone, and that's what made him a top 3 back in fantasy. So trust your guys. I think that they'll be a little bit better. AJ Baines asked, because this is what I wanted to talk about in my start of the week. Should I be worried about Marvin? Now, he was pretty terrible versus the Bills. He couldn't separate, and he was not looking fast at all. Am I worried? No. He's going up against the Rams. I was going to make him my start of the week. That's how confident I am that he will bounce back. Did I love the comments made by Kyler Murray? No, I did not. Not even a little bit. There's a lot going up against Marvin Harrison right now, but you have to believe in the talent. You have to believe in the upside, and a great matchup to really start his track to being a great rookie versus the Los Angeles Rams. So I would say not to worry. It's way too early to be worried.
Way too early. This is a guy that in 1 quarterback leagues you were taking at the 1-2 turn You can't panic yet. If he goes against the Rams, what I think he has to put up, give me at least 50 to 60 yards against the Rams. If we're looking at like a 3 for 40 game, ah, that's when I start getting a bit worried. I'd have to see how he looks though, right? If on tape, is he looking the same kind of stuck in the mud, not being able to reach his top speed, slow in and out of routes, not breaking fast the ball, having drops again? Then we could start kind of recalibrating, and maybe now he's more of a flex option wide receiver too than this top 10 guy we thought we were drafting. But after one game, his college pedigree, his college tape, what he was able to do at Ohio State, I can't just throw that out off of one game in the NFL.
All right, last one, and then we're gonna get out of here. JT Ghost asks, start JMO or Scary Terry full PPR. Transparently, Scary Terry, if he's not going to move around on the field, he's going to be going up against Tay Banks. And I know Terry's a great talent, but they really did not look his way versus the Buccaneers, which I thought was a good matchup in its own right. So for me, JMO, although is questionable, something to look out for. I think he will probably give it a go versus the Buccaneers. I love that play versus the Buccaneers.
Yep, I'm with you. I'd go Jameson.
All right. And listen, that's going to do it from us over here at the Fantasy Reaction Show. We appreciate you guys stopping by. I know the beginning of this podcast or this episode was definitely a little bit more gloom than others. Hopefully, we of course get some good news on the Tua situation. But of course, I'm sending him my best. Of course, we all are sending Tua our prayers and hoping that everything is all right and we get to see him on the football field once again. But ultimately, believe he should do what is in his best interest. But that's going to do it from us over here at the Fantasy Reaction Show. We'll be back here on Monday night recapping the Eagles versus the Falcons, and of course, going over the studs and duds of the week. If you made it this far, we thank you. We appreciate you guys watching our episode. Leave a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell so you know when we go live. Like nights like tonight. Tune into the podcast, Riv Academy, whenever that drops. Joel Moran Show, which is, of course, on his own channel, The Joel Moran Show. But again, we'll see you guys next time.